Ethics, ethics, ethics. Do you find yourself sometimes feeling like, oh my God, I want to do some things in my business as a mental health professional, but I'm afraid that the ethics, the code of ethics is going to become a problem for me? If that's ever come up and you felt it's holding you back and harnessing you from doing some of the things that you want to do, I want to talk to you today because I no longer want to see therapists shrinking to stay out of ethics jail when really this threat, this looming threat, is not as big of a challenge as you might imagine in your mind. Most of the time, when people have violations with ethics, it's because there's been a true and egregious abuse. Maybe they're sleeping with their clients, or they've been fraudulent financially in some way regarding their clients, or they're misrepresenting their licensure type, or there've been some issues already, and they're not governing themselves with good common sense and professionalism. I have taught ethics for many years as a continuing education for social workers and professional counselors. And one of the things that I remember sharing with the audience over and over again is to have a framework for filtering your choices. If you are doing your due diligence, if your intentions are pure, if you know that you are doing no harm, then more than likely you're going to be able to be fine with regard to ethical dilemmas. And if there is a place where someone begins to scrutinize or question, you can walk them through your thought process in a way that allows them to see the intention behind what you're doing, right? And so I say that because I want people to relax in the face of this looming threat of ethics so that they're not shrinking in their businesses and really standing up and doing the things that your clients actually need you to do, or creating spaces that are going to allow them to heal without this fear of, there being an ethical dilemma or an ethical, backlash. Now, one of the things that I also want to create as a caveat is knowing the clients that you're working with. Because sometimes, if we're working with high risk clientele, people where suicidality is a concern, or where you're working with folks that have a certain fragility, then those ethical concerns become all the more important, right? Because that idea of doing no harm becomes a more tight balance when you're not quite sure of what will be harmful to clients. But when we are serving folks that are already functioning well, but are looking to kind of work through something they're adjusting through, or there's been a particular trauma that they're dealing with, but they typically are functioning well, that space of do no harm becomes a bit broader. And so I want you to know that if you're designing programs or services or courses for people that are already functioning well, you don't have to have this huge looming fear of ethical dilemmas in your day-to-day thinking around your business. The other thing I'd like to say is the Board of Ethics, or these code of ethics, either it's NASW or, other national code of ethics that come up. These are things that are always evolving and developing. And sometimes they're a little slow to catch up with things. I don't know if you are old enough to remember when social media first hit the scene and it was really a bigger deal. And therapists had to decide, how are we going to engage with our clients in social media? For many licensure types, it took a few years before we had a clear and just established pattern for what best practices were for social media. And that's because it took a while to see, well, what's the playing field actually going to be? What things will ensure that we do no harm, but what things are appropriate for us to be able to still market our businesses, right? And so I want you to know that there's still room for that kind of pushback. Right now, while we're kind of exploring coaching and people are doing intensives and they're doing other kinds of programming outside of the traditional hour to hour model, there's going to be a space where ethics becomes a part of the conversation later on. And know that your voice will matter in that space too. So be prepared to be brave and really stand up for what you believe to be best practices for the clients that you're serving as an expert in your niche, knowing that you kind of have something to contribute to a conversation about what should be seen as best practices, right? What should be seen as best practices. So I want you, when you're feeling overwhelmed and just nervous about putting yourself out there, have these three thoughts in your mind. What is my intent? Have I done my due diligence to ensure that I'm basically doing no harm? like that I'm clear that I'm doing no harm. And then lastly, I want you to get into the practice of being brave. There are going to be moments when you have to just stretch yourself out there and do things that are different than what you've been doing if you want results different than the ones that you've been getting. So, yes, I am encouraging you by all means to do no harm, but I also don't want you shrinking in the face of a looming fear of an ethical dilemma. I hope this is helpful. If it is, please do like it. Share it with a colleague of yours who also might be trying to think about where do they fit in this ethical conundrum. And of course, if you've not already, it is time for you to subscribe. Take good care of yourself. Take good care of business, and also make sure that those clients are well taken care of. Bye-bye.